My parents treated me as if I were dead for 8 whole years without a single word. But the moment my face appeared on the cover of Forbes under the headline, "Self-Made Billionaire," my mother immediately texted me, "Family Christmas party at 7:30. We have something important to discuss." She thought she was summoning her failure of a daughter back to the fold to beg for scraps. She had no idea she was inviting the new owner of her house. Before I tell you how I fired my own brother from his company in front of 50 guests, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit subscribe if you have ever had to remind people exactly who you are. My name is Jasmine, and I am 34 years old. I stood in my penthouse overlooking the Manhattan skyline when that text came through. Mom never texted. She dictated demands. This time was different. The message was short. Family Christmas party at 7:30. Do not be late. No apology for the 8 years since she kicked me out for choosing coding over a rich husband. No inquiry about my life. Just a command. I could have driven my Bentley Continental down to Atlanta. I could have flown private and landed a helicopter on the lawn. But I wanted to see them as they truly were, not as they would be if they saw my wealth. So I put on a simple black turtleneck and slacks, tied my hair back, and called an Uber X. The ride to the old Buckhead estate was quiet. The driver asked if I worked at the big house on the hill. I just smiled and said something like that. When we pulled up to the wrought iron gates of the estate, my stomach tightened. Not from fear, but from a cold, hard resolve. The house looked exactly the same as the night I left. Massive white columns, perfectly manicured hedges, the glow of expensive chandeliers spilling out onto the driveway, where a fleet of Mercedes and Range Rovers were parked. My Uber looked like a toy car next to them. I thanked the driver and walked up the long stone path. The winter air bit at my cheeks, reminding me of the coldness that lived inside those walls. I did not have a key anymore. They changed the locks a week after I left. I rang the bell, the deep chime echoing inside. I expected a housekeeper, maybe old Mrs. Higgins if she was still alive. But the heavy oak door swung open to reveal a woman I had only seen in photos. Tiffany, my brother Darius's wife. She was blonde, petite, and wearing a red silk dress that probably cost more than my first car. She held a glass of champagne in one hand and looked me up and down with an expression of mild annoyance mixed with superiority. She did not ask who I was. She did not ask why I was there. She just sighed, a sharp, impatient sound that grated on my nerves. "You are late," she snapped, stepping back to let me in but blocking the way to the main hall with her body. "The agency said 7 o'clock. It is 7:35. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get good help on Christmas Eve?" I stood there stunned for a microsecond. She thought I was the help. Of course she did. In her world, a black woman in simple clothes at the service entrance could only be one thing. I opened my mouth to correct her, to say, "I am Jasmine, your sister-in-law." But then I stopped. If she wanted to play this game, I would let her set the board. I decided to test how far her arrogance went. "I apologize," I said smoothly, my voice calm. "Traffic was terrible." Tiffany rolled her eyes, taking a sip of her champagne. "Just save the excuses. We are running low on ice in the main parlor, and the hors d'oeuvres trays need refilling." She reached onto a side table and grabbed a white catering apron that someone had left there. She tossed it at me. It hit my chest and slid down to the floor. I did not move to pick it up. "Pick it up!" She ordered, her voice dropping to that dangerous whisper people use when they want to be threatening without making a scene. "Pick it up, get into the kitchen, and start earning your pay. The guests are waiting, and my husband does not like empty glasses." I looked down at the white apron on the expensive marble floor, then up at her smug, flawless face. She had no idea that the hand she was ordering to scoop ice was the same hand that had just signed the deed to this entire property. She had no idea that the husband she was so worried about was currently living on borrowed time in a house I already owned. I bent down, picked up the apron, and smiled a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Fine," I said. "I will go to the kitchen. But you might want to enjoy that champagne, Tiffany. It is the last expensive thing you will ever taste. What did you say? She asked, her eyes narrowing. I said I will get the ice, I replied, walking past her into the hallway. The game had officially begun. The walk from the foyer to the main parlor felt like crossing a minefield I had survived a lifetime ago. The house smelled exactly the same, a suffocating mixture of fresh pine needles, expensive beeswax polish, and my mother's signature Chanel perfume. Every surface gleamed under the crystal chandeliers, reflecting a life of perfect order and high expectations. I passed the wall of family photos and noticed immediately that I was missing. There were dozens of framed pictures of Darius graduating, Darius playing polo, Darius shaking hands with the mayor. But the spots where my childhood photos used to hang were now filled with generic landscape paintings. It was as if I had never existed in this house at all. I found my mother Patricia holding court near the fireplace. She sat in her high-backed velvet armchair like a queen on a throne, surrounded by the heavy hitters of Atlanta's social scene. She wore a silver gown that shimmered with every breath, her hair coiffed into a helmet of perfection. When I stepped into her line of sight, I expected a reaction. A gasp, a frown, maybe even a flinch. But she gave me nothing. She simply glanced at the diamond watch on her wrist, her expression flat and unreadable, as if I were a delivery person who had arrived 5 minutes outside the scheduled window. She did not stand up. She did not open her arms. She took a slow sip of her martini and turned back to the woman beside her, Mrs. Jenkins, the bishop's wife. For a moment, I stood there in the silence of her rejection, feeling the old sting of tears pricking behind my eyes. But I swallowed them down. The Jasmine who used to cry in her bedroom was gone. The woman standing here today owned the holding company that had just purchased the debt on this very mansion. Finally, she waved a manicured hand in my direction, summoning me closer without looking me in the eye. Everyone turned to look. I could feel their gazes heavy with judgment and curiosity. They had heard the rumors. They knew I was the black sheep who ran away. This is Jasmine, my mother said, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet tone that I knew was fake. She finally decided to grace us with her presence. You remember Jasmine, don't you, Mrs. Jenkins? She has been in New York finding herself. Mrs. Jenkins peered at me over her rimless glasses. Oh yes, the computer girl. We were so worried when you left, dear. Did you ever finish that little degree of yours? My mother laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. Oh, let's not bore everyone with the details. Jasmine is working now. She found a little administrative position at a startup. It is not much, but at least she is off the streets and paying her own rent. Isn't that right, Jasmine? I felt the blood boil in my veins. Administrative position. She was reducing my empire, my 1,200 employees, my NASDAQ listing to a secretary job. She was rewriting my reality to fit her narrative of my failure. She needed me to be small so she could remain big. I opened my mouth to correct her, to tell Mrs. Jenkins that the little startup was actually the leading biotech AI firm in the country. But my mother's eyes locked onto mine. They were cold, hard steel. They dared me to speak. I forced a smile. It is good to see you, Mrs. Jenkins. I am doing very well, thank you. My mother dismissed the guests with a nod, waiting until they had drifted toward the buffet before she turned on me. The smile vanished instantly. Her face settled into a mask of disappointment that I knew better than my own reflection. You look tired, she said, criticizing my appearance instead of saying hello. And that outfit. Is that really the best you could do for Christmas Eve? I told you 8 years ago that chasing those computers was a waste of your beauty. You could have been standing here as Dr. Robinson's wife tonight. He is the chief of surgery now. That could have been your life, Jasmine. Instead, look at you. No husband, no ring. Just a job that probably barely covers your subway fare. I took a deep breath. I did not come here to argue about my love life, Mother. You texted me. You said it was urgent. She scoffed, adjusting the pearls at her throat. It is urgent. But looking at you, I am not sure you can even help. Darius is the one with the future. Darius is the one carrying this family name. You are just here because we need bodies in the room to make the family look complete. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a hiss. Listen to me closely. We have important investors coming tonight, people who can save Darius's company. I allowed you back into this house as a mercy. Do not make me regret it. You will smile, you will nod, and you will not embarrass me with stories about your struggling life in New York. You are lucky to even be allowed at this table. Tonight is about Darius. Do not ruin it. Just as my mother finished outlining my failures, the atmosphere in the room shifted. It was a subtle change, like the air pressure dropping before a storm, but I felt it instantly. All heads turned toward the archway leading to the library. Darius had arrived. My brother, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, strode into the room as if he owned the very air we breathed. He was wearing a custom navy suit that fit him perfectly, the kind that cost more than most people's cars. On his wrist sat a Rolex Submariner that caught the light of the chandelier, flashing a signal of wealth to everyone watching. To the untrained eye, he was the picture of success. A 38-year-old real estate mogul with the world at his feet. But I was not an untrained eye. I was a shark who had spent the last 8 years swimming in the deepest, darkest oceans of the business world. And when I looked at my brother, I did not see power. I saw panic. There was a sheen of sweat on his upper lip that no amount of expensive cologne could mask. His eyes were darting around the room, scanning the faces of the investors, looking for approval, looking for a lifeline. He was smiling, but the smile did not reach those frantic eyes. It was a grimace of desperation painted over with teeth-whitening strips. He made a beeline for Mother, first kissing her cheek with a showy display of affection that made the older ladies in the room coo with delight. Then he turned to me. The smile tightened. "Well, look who the cat dragged in." Darius boomed his voice loud enough to ensure everyone heard. "Little Jasmine, I honestly did not think you would show up. We placed bets, you know. Tiffany bet you could not afford the plane ticket." Laughter rippled through the small circle of sycophants surrounding him. I kept my face impassive, my hands clasped loosely in front of me. "I live in New York, Darius. I can afford a plane ticket." He stepped closer, invading my personal space, his eyes raking over my simple black outfit with disdain. He stopped at my feet. I was wearing a pair of comfortable, understated leather loafers. They were Italian hand-stitched and cost $1,200, but they lacked the flashy logos or red soles that people like Darius associated with money. "Are those the same shoes you wore to graduation?" he asked, pointing a manicured finger at my feet. "Jesus, Jasmine. I know things are tough in the big city, but could you not have stopped at a Payless on the way here? You are embarrassing us. Look at these people. These are heavy hitters, investors, and you look like you just walked off a shift at the library." I decided to let him dig his hole a little deeper. "I like these shoes," I said simply. "They are practical." "Practical," he scoffed, turning back to the crowd to include them in the joke. "Practical is for people who cannot afford luxury. In my world, in the world of high-stakes real estate, appearance is everything." Speaking of which, I was just telling Mr. Henderson here about the new Skyline complex we are breaking ground on next month. 80 luxury units, rooftop infinity pools. It is going to revolutionize downtown Atlanta. We are talking about a $50 million valuation in the first quarter alone. He was lying through his teeth. I knew for a fact that the Skyline project had been stalled for 6 months because he could not secure the permits, and his contractors had walked off the job due to non-payment. I knew this because my due diligence team had read every single email in his company's server before I bought his debt. He was selling a dream that had already turned into a nightmare. But he stood there puffing out his chest, accepting the congratulations, and the awe of the room playing the part of the tycoon, while his foundation crumbled beneath him. He put a heavy hand on my shoulder, squeezing it a little too hard. "You should take notes, Jasmine. This is what real success looks like. Building something tangible. Not just staring at computer screens all day. Maybe if you are nice to me, I can let you answer phones at the sales office. We always need someone to fetch coffee for the closers." The condescension was so thick I could taste it. He truly believed he was superior. He truly believed that his leased car and his maxed-out credit cards made him a king. while my liquid assets and diversified portfolio made me a peasant because I did not wear them on my sleeve. I looked at his hand on my shoulder, then up at his face. "I am happy for you, Darius," I said, my voice dripping with hidden sarcasm. "It sounds like you have everything under control." He leaned in close, then bringing his face right next to my ear so that only I could hear him. The jovial brother act dropped instantly, replaced by a snake-like hiss. "Cut the act, Jasmine. I know why you are here. Mom told me you are broke. If you want a handout, you are going to have to earn it. Eat your food fast, keep your mouth shut, and then get out of my house. Or if you want to be useful for once in your pathetic life, meet me in the study later. I have some papers you need to sign. A little guarantee for a bridge loan. You still have that trust fund from Grandma, right? It is time you paid rent for all the years we tolerated you." He pulled back, slapping my shoulder jovially as if he had just told a funny joke. "Do not let Tiffany see you looking so miserable," he added with a wink. "She hates it when the help looks depressed. It ruins the vibe." He turned his back on me to accept a glass of scotch from a waiter, leaving me standing there with his threat hanging in the air. He wanted me to sign away my grandmother's legacy to plug the holes in his sinking ship. He wanted to use me one last time before discarding me again. I watched him laugh, throwing his head back, completely unaware that he was standing in the presence of his executioner. He thought he was giving me an ultimatum, but all he had done was sign his own professional death warrant. The dining room was a masterpiece of old Southern wealth, featuring a mahogany table long enough to land a plane on and a crystal chandelier that probably cost more than 4 years of college tuition. As we filed in, I watched Tiffany orchestrate the seating arrangements with the precision of a general on a battlefield. She directed the investors to the seats of honor on either side of my mother, and Darius took his place at the opposite end of the table, ready to hold court. I scanned the place cards looking for my name, assuming I would be squeezed in somewhere between the minor relatives, or perhaps next to the bishop wife. But my name was nowhere to be found on the main spread. "Oh, Jasmine Tiffany," chirped her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "We did not want you to feel overwhelmed sitting with the adults. You know how boring business talk can be for someone who does not understand high finance. So I made you a special spot over there." She pointed a manicured finger toward the far corner of the room, directly next to the swinging double doors of the kitchen. There was no place setting, just a lonely chair positioned so that every time a server walked in or out, I would be hit with a blast of hot air and the smell of dish soap. I looked at the table again and noticed there was one empty chair left, right next to Tiffany. It was upholstered in velvet and had a silk pillow on it. Before I could ask, Tiffany whistled, and her Pomeranian Coco trotted in, jumping up onto the velvet chair. "Coco gets anxious if she is not near me," Tiffany explained with a sickly sweet smile, petting the dog head. "You understand, right? Family first." I understood perfectly. In this hierarchy, the dog ranked higher than the daughter. I walked to my exile seat by the kitchen door and sat down. The humiliation was designed to be public and absolute. The investors glanced at me with pity, then quickly looked away, uncomfortable with the obvious display of cruelty. I unfolded my napkin and placed it on my lap, keeping my spine steel straight. If they wanted to treat me like a servant, I would behave like a queen in exile. Dinner was served, a parade of courses that smelled delicious, but tasted like ash in my mouth. Tiffany, however, was just getting started. Having successfully physically marginalized me, she now decided to attack my identity. She waited until there was a lull in the conversation, until the only sound was the scraping of silver against china. "Jasmine, I have been meaning to ask you about your hair," Tiffany said loudly, her eyes fixated on my natural curls. "Is that a weave? It looks very affordable. I know money is tight for you, but maybe for Christmas we can get you a gift card to a salon that handles ethnic hair, you know, to tame that texture." My mother stiffened slightly but said nothing. Darius chuckled. I took a slow sip of water. "It is not a weave, Tiffany. It grows out of my head. And I quite like the texture, thank you." Tiffany laughed, a tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, you are so brave. I could never go out in public looking so undone. But I suppose in your neighborhood it fits right in." Where are you living now anyway? Is it safe? I see such terrible things on the news about those inner-city housing projects. Do you hear gunshots at night? She was painting a picture for the investors. Jasmine, the poor, struggling charity case living in the ghetto. She wanted them to see Darius as the successful stability and me as the chaotic failure. I live in Tribeca, actually, I said, keeping my voice level. It is quite quiet. Tribeca. Tiffany scoffed. Oh, honey, you do not have to lie to impress us. We are family. We know you probably live in a closet with 5 roommates. It is nothing to be ashamed of. We are just worried about your safety. Just then, the sommelier approached the table with a bottle of vintage red wine to present to the host. He moved toward Darius, but Tiffany intercepted him, wanting to show off her sophistication. We will take the red one, she announced, waving her hand dismissively. Just pour it. We do not need the whole song and dance. The sommelier hesitated, looking uncomfortable. Madam, this is a 1982 Chateau Margaux. It requires decanting, and I must ensure it is to your liking before pouring. Tiffany rolled her eyes. It is wine. Just pour it. I watched the man wince. He was holding a $5,000 bottle of wine, and she was treating it like grape juice. I could not help myself. I caught the sommelier's eye and spoke clearly, cutting through the tension. Monsieur, s'il vous plaît, ne le versez pas encore. Il a besoin de respirer pendant au moins 30 minutes. Et apportez-nous des verres à Bordeaux appropriés. Ceux-ci sont pour le Pinot Noir. The table went dead silent. Tiffany fork froze halfway to her mouth. The sommelier, relieved and surprised, bowed deeply to me. Mademoiselle speaks French, he asked, his face lighting up. Oui, I replied, slipping back into English, but keeping the aristocratic cadence I had learned during my years expanding my company across Europe. And please bring the 1996 vintage instead. The 82 is excellent, but it is a bit too heavy for the duck confit we are having. My brother would not know the difference, but I certainly would. I looked at Tiffany. Her mouth was slightly open, her face flushing a deep shade of red that matched her dress. She had tried to paint me as uneducated and poor, but in 2 sentences I had outclassed her in front of the very people she was trying to impress. The investors looked from her to me with new interest. I smiled, raising my water glass in a mock toast. You were saying something about my education, Tiffany. Please continue. I am all ears. The heavy oak doors swung open again, signaling the arrival of the evening true guests of honor. A hush fell over the room as Mr. Henderson and his team of investors walked in, followed closely by Pastor Jenkins. In an instant, my mother underwent a terrifying transformation. The scowl vanished, replaced by a radiant, welcoming smile that could light up a stadium. Her posture softened, her eyes filled with a manufactured warmth, and she rushed forward with arms wide open. It was a masterclass in deception, and I was about to become her favorite prop. Jasmine, get over here, she called out, her voice singing with false affection. Come say hello to the pastor and Mr. Henderson. Do not be shy, darling. I walked over, feeling like a marionette being pulled by invisible strings. My mother wrapped an arm around my waist, but her fingers dug into my side with a bruising grip, a silent warning to play along. This is my daughter Jasmine, she announced, beaming at the men. She flew all the way from New York just to be here for her brother Big Night. We are a tight-knit bunch. You know what they say, Mr. Henderson? A family that supports each other stays together. That is the kind of stability you are investing in. Mr. Henderson. A gray-haired man with eyes like a hawk shook my hand. His grip was firm, but his gaze was calculating. He was not looking at me. He was looking for cracks in the facade. Nice to meet you, Jasmine, he said. Your brother speaks very highly of the family support system. It is rare to see such unity in business these days. I forced a smile, my face muscles aching from the effort. We certainly have a history, Mr. Henderson. Just then, a photographer hired for the event began snapping pictures. My mother pulled me tighter, sandwiching me between herself and Darius, while Tiffany leaned in from the side holding her dog. Flash bulbs blinded me. Chin up, Jasmine, my mother hissed through her frozen smile. Look successful. Look like you belong. I realized then exactly what I was. I was not a guest. I was collateral. I was stage decoration meant to prove that Darius came from a wholesome, stable background. They needed the image of a loving, supportive sister to counter the rumors of his erratic behavior and gambling debts. I was the final coat of paint on a rotting fence. Overwhelmed by the flash and the suffocating scent of my mother perfume, I muttered an excuse about needing fresh air. I slipped away toward the French doors that led to the terrace, hoping for a moment of silence. The terrace was dark and cold, but the air was clean. As I stood in the shadows, breathing deeply, I heard the sliding door crack open just a few feet away. I pressed myself against the brick wall, instinct taking over. It was Darius and Tiffany. They had stepped out for a cigarette, thinking they were alone. God, I hate her, Tiffany whispered, her voice venomous. Did you see those shoes? And the way she spoke to the sommelier. She thinks she is better than us just because she learned a few French words. Relax, babe, Darius replied, the sound of a lighter flicking audible in the quiet night. She is serving her purpose. Henderson looks impressed. He likes the family angle. Once he signs that check tonight, we are in the clear. And what about her? Tiffany asked. How long do we have to pretend to like her? Darius laughed, a cruel, low sound. Just until the ink is dry. I need her to sign that guarantor document for the bridge loan later. Once I have the funding secured and her signature on the liability waiver, we kick her out. Tonight. As soon as the party is over, I will tell her to call an Uber. She can sleep at the airport for all I care. We just need to tolerate the little rat for 2 more hours. I stood frozen in the cold, my breath misting in front of me. They were not just using me for image. They were planning to saddle me with debt and then discard me onto the street in the middle of the night. The cruelty was breathtaking in its efficiency. I waited until they went back inside before I followed, my heart pounding not with fear, but with a cold, dark rage. I walked back into the parlor just as everyone was gathering around the coffee table. Darius had the contracts spread out. A gold pen sat waiting on the velvet cloth. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation. My mother was practically vibrating with greed, her eyes locked on the paper that would save her reputation. Mr. Henderson picked up the pen. Darius held his breath. Tiffany stroked her dog nervously. Well, Darius, Mr. Henderson said. Everything seems to be in order. The portfolio looks ambitious, and with your family backing, it seems like a safe bet. He lowered the pen to the paper. Darius grinned a predatory, triumphant grin. But then Mr. Henderson's phone buzzed loudly on the table. He paused, glancing down at the screen. His brow furrowed. He read the message once, then twice. Slowly, he put the cap back on the pen and pushed the contract away. The room went deadly silent. Is there a problem? Darius asked, his voice cracking slightly. Mr. Henderson stood up, buttoning his jacket. His face was no longer friendly. It was closed and cold. I just received an alert from my analysts, he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. It seems there are significant discrepancies in your previous company filings, Darius. And there is a rumor circulating on Wall Street tonight that your primary liquidity is non-existent. What Darius stammered, pale as a sheet. That is impossible. Those are just rumors. Jealous competitors. We do not invest in rumors, Mr. Henderson said, signaling his team to pack up. And we certainly do not invest in fraud. We are done here. As the investors turned to leave, the room erupted into chaos. My mother gasped, clutching her chest, for real this time. Darius stood paralyzed, staring at the unsigned contract that had just become his death warrant. And from my corner of the room I watched the house of cards begin to fall, taking a sip of my wine and preparing for the real show to begin. The last car taillights faded down the driveway, and the heavy front door clicked shut with a sound like a prison cell locking. The performance was officially over. In the span of a heartbeat, the warm maternal mask fell from my mother's face, leaving behind the cold, hard features of a woman who had just lost a fortune. She did not say a word. She simply jerked her head toward the library down the hall. It was not an invitation. It was a court summons. I followed them into the study, the room where my father used to smoke cigars, and tell me I was too loud, too opinionated, and too ambitious for a girl. The air still smelled of stale tobacco and old leather. Darius went straight to the wet bar, pouring himself a glass of scotch with hands that shook so violently the crystal decanter clattered against the glass. Tiffany collapsed onto the Chesterfield sofa, clutching her Pomeranian like a lifeline, her face pale and streaked with mascara tears. My mother closed the doors and locked them. She turned to face us, her back rigid against the wood. "Tell her, Darius," she commanded. "Tell your sister what you did." Darius slammed his drink down on the desk, liquid splashing onto the polished wood. He refused to look at me. He looked at the floor, at the bookshelves, at the ceiling, anywhere but into my eyes. "It is not what I did," he snapped, his voice rising in defensive anger. "It is the market. The economy is in shambles, Jasmine. You live in New York, you should know this. The interest rates spiked. The supply chain collapsed. My investors got cold feet because of macroeconomic factors that are completely out of my control. I am a victim of bad timing." I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "Cut the business school jargon, Darius. Mr. Henderson did not leave because of the economy. He left because his analysts found fraud. How much are you in the hole?" Darius laughed, a dry, hysterical sound. "Fraud is such an ugly word. I just moved some capital around. I leveraged the company assets to cover some personal debts. It was supposed to be temporary, a short-term bridge loan until the Skyline project broke ground. But then the permits got delayed, and the bridge loan came due." "How much?" I asked again, my voice cutting through his excuses. He took a large gulp of scotch, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. $300,000. I need 300,000 by tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. "And if you do not get it?" I asked. He finally looked at me, and I saw genuine terror in his eyes. It was not the fear of bankruptcy. It was the fear of physical harm. "Then the bank forecloses on this house," he whispered. "And the people I borrowed the other half of the money from, well, they do not use lawyers to collect debts. They use baseball bats." I stared at him. The golden child. The prince of Atlanta real estate. He had gambled away the family legacy and gotten into bed with loan sharks, all to maintain an image of success that was never real. Tiffany let out a wail from the sofa. "We are going to be homeless. My friends will see us on the street. I cannot live in a rental, Darius. I cannot be poor. Do something." That is when my mother stepped forward. She walked across the room until she was standing inches from my face. She smelled of gin and desperation. "We are not going to be homeless," she said, her voice deadly calm. "Because you are going to fix this, Jasmine." "Me?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "You just spent 3 hours telling me I am a failure. How can a failure fix a $300,000 problem?" My mother's eyes narrowed. "Do not play dumb with me. I know about the trust fund." The room went silent. "I know your grandmother set up a separate account for you before she died," she continued. "She always had a soft spot for you. She thought you were special. I know there is money in there. I do not know how much, but I know she put $50,000 in it 20 years ago. With compound interest, it should be enough to at least call off the loan sharks and buy us some time with the bank." I looked at her, incredulous. "You want me to empty my grandmother's legacy, the only thing she left specifically for me to save Darius from his own stupidity?" "It is not stupidity," Darius yelled, slamming his hand on the desk. "It is a temporary cash flow problem. And yes, I want you to give me the money. You owe us, Jasmine. We raised you. We put a roof over your head. You walked out on us for 8 years. You abandoned this family. Now is your chance to redeem yourself." "Redeem myself," I repeated quietly. "For what?" "For refusing to be a trophy wife. For wanting a career. For being selfish," my mother spat. "You have always been selfish. Hoarding that money while your brother suffers. You probably have not touched a cent of it, have you? You are probably saving it for some rainy day while we are drowning right here in front of you." "Well, it is raining, Jasmine. It is pouring." She reached into the desk drawer and pulled out a laptop, slamming it open on the desk. "Log in," she ordered, pointing at the screen. "Transfer the funds to Darius' account. Right now." I looked at the laptop, then at Darius sweating in his expensive suit, then at Tiffany weeping over her dog, and finally at my mother whose face was twisted with entitlement. They truly believed they owned me. They believed that my assets were their safety net. They had no idea that the trust fund was just a drop in the ocean compared to what I actually owned. But they did not want my success. They just wanted my compliance. I took a step toward the desk. My mother's eyes lit up with triumph. She thought she had won. She thought the beaten-down daughter had returned to save the day. "You are right," I said, my voice soft. "Grandma did leave me money, and I have not touched it." "See," Darius shouted, pointing at me. "I told you she was holding out on us. Transfer it. Hurry up before the banks close." I stood over the laptop, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. But I did not type my banking password. Instead, I looked up at my mother and asked one final question. "If I give you this money, will you finally respect me? Will you finally admit that I am equal to Darius?" My mother scoffed, a cruel sound that sealed her fate. "Respect is earned, Jasmine," she said coldly. "Doing your duty to your family does not get you a medal. It just means you are finally knowing your place. Now stop stalling and give your brother the money. He has a future to build. You are just the safety net." I looked at her, and for the first time in 8 years, the last shred of guilt I felt for leaving them evaporated completely. They did not want a daughter. They wanted a bank account. And they were about to find out just how expensive banking with me really was. I stared at my mother across the mahogany desk, and for the first time in my life, I saw her not as a giant figure of authority, but as a small, desperate woman clinging to a fading illusion of power. She expected me to crumble. She expected the old Jasmine, the one who craved her approval like oxygen, to frantically type in the password and drain the account just to see her smile. But that Jasmine had died 8 years ago in a cold apartment in Brooklyn. The woman standing before her now was forged in the fire of rejection, and I did not negotiate with terrorists even when they shared my DNA. I slowly closed the laptop lid. The sound was soft, but in the breathless silence of the room it echoed like a gunshot. "No," I said. My voice was not loud. It was not angry. It was simply absolute. Darius blinked as if he had misheard me. "Excuse me," he stammered. "What did you just say?" I said no. I repeated, keeping my eyes locked on my mother. "I will not transfer the money. I will not bail you out, Darius. And I certainly will not pay for the privilege of being insulted in the house I grew up in." My mother's face went through a terrifying spectrum of colors, shifting from pale to a mottled, furious red. She did not scream. Instead, she chose a weapon far more effective than volume. She chose guilt. Her shoulders slumped and her eyes filled with instant, well-practiced tears. She pressed a hand to her chest, letting out a ragged breath that sounded like a death rattle. "After everything I have done for you," she whispered, her voice trembling with theatrical heartbreak. "I carried you in my womb for 9 months, Jasmine. I labored for 18 hours to bring you into this world. I fed you. I clothed you. I sacrificed my own dreams so you could have piano lessons and private school. And this is how you repay me. By watching your own brother drown when you have a life raft right in your hands." She stumbled forward, grabbing the edge of the desk for support. "You are my flesh and blood, Jasmine. How can you be so cold? Does family mean nothing to you?" It was a masterclass in manipulation. If I had been 22, I would have been on my knees begging for forgiveness. But I was 34, and I knew that those piano lessons were only so she could brag to her friends, and that private school was to ensure I married a rich man, not so I could get an education. "You speak of sacrifice, Mother," I said calmly, "but the only thing you ever sacrificed was me. You sacrificed my happiness for your image. You sacrificed my potential for your comfort. And now you want to sacrifice my financial security for Darius' mistakes. That is not love. That is cannibalism." My mother let out a sharp cry and collapsed into the nearest chair, clutching her chest with both hands. Her breathing became shallow and rapid. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. My heart, she gasped, rolling her eyes back slightly. Oh God, my heart. It feels like it is being squeezed. Darius, help me. Your sister is killing me. She is actually killing me. Darius rushed to her side, dropping to his knees. Mom, breathe, just breathe. Jasmine, look what you are doing. You are giving her a heart attack. Are you happy now? Do you want her death on your conscience? Tiffany jumped up from the sofa, pointing a shaking finger at me, her face twisted in ugly, self-righteous fury. You are a monster. I always knew you were cold, but this is evil. She is an old woman. She is your mother. How can you stand there and do nothing? You are going to let her die over a few $1,000s. You are the most selfish person I have ever met. Give him the money, you witch. Save her life. I watched the scene unfold with clinical detachment. I knew my mother's medical history better than she did because my insurance company covered her. She had the heart of an ox. This was not a cardiac event. This was a tantrum. If she is having a heart attack, we should call 911, I said, reaching for my phone. I will call the paramedics right now. They can be here in 5 minutes. No, Darius shouted, panic flashing in his eyes. He knew that an ambulance would bring attention, and attention would bring questions about why the matriarch of the family was collapsing in a locked study while he was being investigated for fraud. No police, no ambulances. Just give us the money, Jasmine, and her stress will go away. That is the only medicine she needs. I paused, phone in hand, looking down at my mother, who was peeking through her eyelashes to see if her performance was working. She looked ridiculous. A grown woman feigning illness to rob her own daughter. It was pathetic, and it was the final nail in the coffin of my relationship with her. Put the phone away, Jasmine, my mother groaned miraculously, finding the strength to speak. Just sign the transfer. Do not let your mother die thinking she raised a traitor. Do it for the family. Do it because you are my daughter. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and walked toward the door. I had seen enough. I had heard enough. I cannot help you, I said, my hand resting on the doorknob. My mother sat up straight, the heart attack vanishing instantly, replaced by pure, unadulterated venom. If you walk out that door, Jasmine, she spat, her voice low and dangerous, you are dead to me. Do you hear me? You are dead to this family. I turned back one last time, looking at the three of them. The brother who saw me as a wallet, the sister-in-law who saw me as a servant, and the mother who saw me as a possession. You already played that card, Mother, I said, my voice dropping to a temperature that froze the air in the room. You told me I was dead to you 8 years ago when you threw me out. You treated me like a ghost for a decade. And you should know something about ghosts, Mother. We do not carry cash. Dead people do not have money to lend. The silence that followed my refusal was heavy and suffocating, but it was broken, not by my mother's screams, but by a low, chilling laugh from the sofa. Tiffany stood up slowly, dropping the Pomeranian onto the cushions without a second glance. Her face was no longer twisted in fake concern or exaggerated grief. It was smoothed out into a mask of pure, unadulterated malice. She walked toward me, the heels of her red-bottom shoes clicking rhythmically against the hardwood floor like the ticking of a bomb. She stopped right next to Darius, placing a possessive hand on his shoulder, but her eyes never left mine. You think you are so clever, don't you, Jasmine? She said, her voice devoid of the southern charm she usually plastered on thick for company. You come in here with your quiet attitude and your cryptic answers, pretending like you are some mystery woman. But I know the truth. You are not refusing to give us the money because of principle. You are refusing because you do not have it. She took a step closer, invading my personal space again, but this time I did not step back. I held my ground, watching her unravel. I did my homework on you, she hissed. When Darius told me his little sister was coming to town, I did not just plan the menu. I hired a private investigator. I have friends in New York, Jasmine. Powerful friends. I asked them to look you up. I wanted to know where you worked. I wanted to know who you were dating. I wanted to know if you were worth knowing. She circled me like a vulture inspecting a carcass. And do you know what they found? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. No LinkedIn profile, no corporate bio, no digital footprint whatsoever. In this day and age, if you do not exist online, it means you are hiding something. It means you are ashamed of what you do. I remained silent, my face impassive. She interpreted my silence as guilt. She thought she had caught me in a lie, but in reality, she had just confirmed the efficiency of my security team. My identity was scrubbed from the public internet for safety reasons, not shame. But I let her continue. I let her dig her own grave. So tell me, Jasmine. She spat, leaning in close enough that I could smell the stale champagne on her breath. How does a woman with no job and no degree survive in New York City? How does she afford $1,200 loafers and a plane ticket home? We all know there is only one profession that pays cash and requires no resume. Darius looked up from the desk, his eyes widening. Tiffany, what are you saying? I am saying your sister is a whore, Darius. Tiffany screamed, losing all control. She is a high-class escort. That is why she has no digital presence. That is why she comes here acting like she is better than us. She sells herself to rich men and then comes back here to judge us for trying to run a legitimate business. The accusation hung in the air, ugly and crude. My mother gasped, covering her mouth with her hand, but I noticed she did not jump to my defense. She just watched, waiting to see if the accusation would break me. Is that where the money is coming from? Jasmine, Tiffany taunted, poking me hard in the chest with her manicured finger. Is that why you won't transfer the trust fund? Because you need it to buy your next dress for your next client. You are disgusting. You are trash. You pollute this house just by standing in it. I looked at her finger poking my chest, then up at her contorted face. I felt a cold calm settle over me. It was the same calm I felt before acquiring a competitor or crushing a hostile takeover. You are projecting, Tiffany, I said quietly. Just because the only way you know how to get money is by marrying it, does not mean every woman operates that way. Some of us actually work. Some of us build empires while you are busy grooming your dog and spying on your in-laws. The insult landed with the precision of a sniper shot. Tiffany's face turned a violent shade of purple. The vein in her forehead throbbed. She was not used to being challenged. She was used to being the queen bee, the one who stung without consequence. How dare you, she shrieked. How dare you speak to me like that in my own house? I am a lady. I am a wife. You are nothing. You are street trash. She raised her hand. It happened in slow motion. I saw the muscles in her arm tense. I saw the flash of the diamond ring on her finger, the ring my brother had bought with stolen money. She swung her hand toward my face, intending to slap the defiance right out of me, but the slap never landed. My hand shot up, moving faster than she could track. I caught her wrist inches from my cheek. The sound of skin hitting skin echoed in the silent room. I squeezed. Not enough to break bone, but enough to let her know that the physical power dynamic had just shifted drastically. Tiffany gasped, trying to yank her hand back, but my grip was iron. I slowly lowered her arm, forcing her to bow slightly under the pressure. I locked eyes with her, and for the first time that night, I let the mask slip completely. I let her see the steel beneath the skin. I let her see the CEO who fired people for incompetence without blinking. I let her see the predator that the business world feared. I suggest you think very carefully about your next move, Tiffany. I said, my voice low and devoid of any emotion. Because if you ever try to touch me again, you will lose a lot more than just your dignity. Darius shoved Tiffany behind him, not out of protection, but because he needed clear access to me. He scrambled around the other side of the mahogany desk, his movements frantic and uncoordinated like a cornered animal. He ripped open the top drawer and pulled out a thick stack of legal documents, slamming them down onto the leather surface with a force that made the lamp rattle. He uncapped a gold fountain pen and thrust it toward me, the nib quivering in the air just inches from my face. Forget the trust fund. he shouted, his voice cracking with hysteria. That 50,000 is peanuts anyway. It won't even cover the interest on what I owe. I need real collateral, Jasmine. I need a guarantor. He flipped the document open to the last page, pointing a trembling finger at the signature line. Sign this, he ordered. I looked down at the paper. It was not a transfer form. It was a comprehensive liability waiver and a co-signer agreement. I scanned the legal jargon quickly, my eyes narrowing as I realized the magnitude of what he was demanding. This document did not just ask for the money in my grandmother's account. It pledged all of my future assets, my credit rating, and any property I might acquire as collateral for Darius's business debts. It was financial suicide. He was asking me to handcuff myself to his sinking ship and drag myself down to the bottom of the ocean with him. You cannot be serious, I said, looking up at him with genuine disbelief. This is a guarantor agreement, Darius. If I sign this, I become liable for every cent you owe. If you default, the bank comes after me. They take my income. They take my home. You are asking me to mortgage my entire future to pay for your gambling addiction. I am asking you to do your duty, he screamed, slamming his fist onto the table so hard that a crystal tumbler fell off the edge and shattered on the floor. The sound was explosive, sharp, and violent, but nobody moved. My mother sat frozen in her chair, her eyes wide, not with fear for me, but with fear that I would say no. You have no future without this family, Darius bellowed, his face turning a deep, dangerous shade of red. Who do you think you are? You are nothing without the name Williams. I stayed here. I built this company. I took care of Mom while you were off playing computer games in New York. I deserve your support. I deserve everything you have because I am the one who carried the burden of legacy. He grabbed the lapels of his jacket, straightening them aggressively, as if trying to reassemble his dignity. Sign the paper, Jasmine. Or so help me God, I will ruin you. I will sue you for elder abuse, claiming you abandoned Mom. I will drag your name through the mud until you cannot get a job sweeping floors. I will make sure the whole world knows you are an ungrateful traitor. The room vibrated with his rage. It was a physical weight pressing down on us. My mother nodded slowly, her eyes hard and cold. Just sign it, Jasmine, she whispered, her voice cutting through the tension like a razor. Give your brother what he needs. It is the least you can do after all the pain you caused us. You walked away. Now pay the price of admission to come back. I looked at them, really looked at them. They were not family. They were parasites. They believed they were entitled to consume me simply because we shared a bloodline. The anger that had been simmering in my gut for 8 years finally boiled over. I will never sign that paper, I said, my voice steady but loud enough to ring off the walls. I would rather burn every dollar I have than give a single cent to you, Darius. You talk about legacy. Your legacy is fraud. Your legacy is failure, and I will not let you infect my life with your incompetence. Darius let out a roar of pure frustration. He lunged across the desk, grabbing the paper and shoving it into my chest. Sign it, he screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. Sign it now, or I will break every finger in your hand until you do. He raised his hand again, his face contorted into a mask of pure violence. The air in the room was electric with the promise of bloodshed. I braced myself, ready to defend myself, ready to take him down if I had to, but then a sound cut through the chaos. Ding-dong. The doorbell rang. It was a cheerful, polite chime that stood in stark contrast to the ugliness inside the study. It rang again, insistent and normal. Darius froze his hand mid-air. My mother flinched. The sudden intrusion of the outside world shattered the bubble of violence Darius had created. We all turned toward the hallway. Who is that? Tiffany whispered, her voice trembling. Did you call the police? I did not call anyone, I said, straightening my jacket. Darius lowered his hand, breathing heavily. He glared at me one last time before storming out of the study and down the hall to the front door. We followed him, drawn by a strange magnetic pull. Darius yanked the front door open, ready to scream at whoever was disturbing him. But standing on the porch was a uniformed delivery man holding a plastic-wrapped package. "Delivery for Mr. Darius Williams," the man said cheerfully, holding out a clipboard. "Express evening delivery. You subscribe to the Platinum service, sir." Darius blinked, confused. He snatched the clipboard, signed it aggressively, and grabbed the package. "Get off my porch!" he snarled, slamming the door in the man's face. He turned back to us, holding the package. It was a magazine, the latest issue of Forbes. He had subscribed to it years ago to display on his coffee table, a prop to make him look like a serious investor. He ripped the plastic off his hands, still shaking from the adrenaline of our fight. "Great," he muttered, staring at the glossy cover without really seeing it. "Just what I needed, reading about billionaire geniuses while my own sister tries to bankrupt me." He held the magazine up, mocking me. "You see this, Jasmine? This is where I belong. Among the elite. Among the people who actually build things, not like you." He looked down at the cover to emphasize his point. And that is when he stopped. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like his heart had stopped beating. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He stared at the magazine in his hands as if it had suddenly turned into a live grenade. Darius threw the magazine onto the mahogany desk with such force that it slid across the polished surface and nearly knocked over the lamp. He did not even look at it. To him, it was just a prop, a symbol of the world he desperately wanted to belong to, but was currently being locked out of. He was too busy screaming at me, too busy trying to physically intimidate me into signing away my life, to care about the articles inside. "This is what success looks like," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at the glossy pages he had just discarded. "People who make things happen. People who command respect. Not you, Jasmine. You are just an obstacle. You are a speed bump on my road to greatness, and I am done slowing down for you." Tiffany was standing next to him, her chest heaving with exertion. The heat in the room was stifling, a mixture of rising tempers and the closed door trapping the air inside. She reached out and snatched the magazine off the desk, not to read it, but to use it as a weapon against the heat. She began fanning herself aggressively, the heavy paper whooshing back and forth, sending strands of her blonde hair flying. "God, it is so hot in here," she complained, wiping a bead of sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. "You are suffocating us, Jasmine. Your very presence sucks the oxygen out of the room. I cannot wait until you are gone. I cannot wait to scrub this house from top to bottom to get the stench of your failure out of the curtains." She continued to fan herself, the magazine blurring in her hand. She glared at me with pure, unadulterated hate. I stood perfectly still, watching them unravel. It was almost poetic. Darius was ranting about being elite while standing on the precipice of bankruptcy, and Tiffany was holding the proof of my ultimate victory in her hand, using it to cool down her temper tantrum without having the slightest clue what she was holding. I watched her eyes as she ranted. I watched them dart from my face to Darius, and then down to the magazine in her hand. It happened in an instant. One second she was mid-sentence about to call me another derogatory name, and the next second she froze. Her hand stopped moving mid-air. The whooshing sound of the paper ceased abruptly, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. She frowned, staring down at the cover. Her brain was trying to process information that contradicted everything she believed to be true. She blinked once, then twice. She brought the magazine closer to her face, squinting as if the lighting in the room had suddenly changed. "What is it?" Tiffany Darius snapped, impatient with her sudden silence. "Do not stop. Tell her exactly what we think of her. We need to break her down." But Tiffany did not answer. The blood drained from her face so rapidly it looked like a curtain falling. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked from the magazine cover to me and then back to the magazine. Her eyes grew wide, terrified circles. The hand holding the magazine began to tremble violently, making the pages rustle in the quiet room. I knew exactly what she was seeing. I had approved the final proof of that cover 2 weeks ago. It was a shot taken in my Manhattan penthouse. I was wearing a simple black turtleneck almost identical to the one I was wearing right now. My hair was pulled back, and the lighting made me look like exactly what I was, a titan of industry. Duh. Darius Tiffany stammered, her voice barely a whisper. What? Darius barked, turning to look at her. What is wrong with you? Are you having a panic attack too? Tiffany shook her head slowly, her eyes never leaving the image in her hands. She looked like she had seen a ghost. A $1 billion ghost. Mom, she whispered, turning the magazine slowly toward my mother, who was still slumped in her chair, clutching her chest. Darius, you need to look at this. Look at what Darius yelled, snatching the magazine from her hands. I do not have time for games, Tiffany. I am trying to save our lives here. He looked down at the magazine, ready to toss it aside again. But then he saw it. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. Darius stopped breathing. He stared at the face on the cover. A face he had known his entire life. A face he had mocked just 5 minutes ago for being plain and tired. The headline was printed in bold gold letters that shimmered under the chandelier light. Jasmine Williams, the $1 billion code. How the Queen of AI built a tech empire from the shadows. Net worth $2 billion. Darius looked at the picture. Then he looked at me. Then he looked back at the picture. The cognitive dissonance was almost physical. He could not reconcile the sister he treated like a servant with the woman staring back at him from the cover of the most prestigious business magazine in the world. No, he whispered the word escaping his lips like a prayer. No, this is a joke. This is a prank. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for me to tell him it was a fake, that I had printed it myself to trick them. But I just stood there, my expression mirroring the calm, powerful gaze of the woman on the cover. Read it, Darius. I said, my voice soft but filling every corner of the room. Read the byline. Read the date. It is not a prank. It is your reality check. The silence that descended on the room was heavier than the mahogany furniture and colder than the winter air outside. It was a vacuum, a void where oxygen used to be. For a solid 10 seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The only sound was the frantic thumping of Darius' heart, which seemed loud enough to crack his ribs. He stood there frozen, holding the magazine like it was a holy relic that had suddenly burst into flames in his hands. His eyes darted back and forth between the glossy cover and my face, trying to reconcile the image of the titan of industry with the sister he had just threatened to sue. Read it, Tiffany whispered, her voice barely audible. Read it out loud, Darius. Darius swallowed hard, his Adam apple bobbing convulsively. He licked his dry lips and began to read, his voice shaking so badly the words came out in a stuttering cadence. Jasmine Williams, the AI queen. How the invisible architect of modern biotechnology built an empire from the shadows. Net worth $1.2 billion. He stopped. The number hung in the air. 1.2 billion. It was a number so large it felt abstract, meaningless, in the context of this room where they were fighting over 300,000. Darius looked up at me, his eyes wide and glassy. He looked like a man who had just realized he was bringing a plastic knife to a nuclear war. That is impossible, my mother said, her voice sharp and brittle, cutting through the shock. She sat up straighter in her chair, clutching her chest again, but this time not in pain, but in denial. She refused to accept a reality where I was superior to them. It broke the fundamental laws of her universe. It is a mistake, she insisted, waving a dismissive hand at the magazine. It must be a different Jasmine Williams, or a typo. Maybe they mean 1.2 million. Even that seems unlikely for someone who dresses like a librarian. Give me that, Darius. She snatched the magazine from his hands, her movements jerky and desperate. She brought it close to her face, squinting aggressively at the photo. She wanted to find a flaw. She wanted to find proof that it was an imposter. She wanted to prove that her scapegoat was still a scapegoat. Look at this woman, she scoffed, pointing at the cover. She looks confident. She looks powerful. This is not your sister. Your sister is... She trailed off. Her eyes had drifted down from the face in the photo to the clothing. In the picture, I was wearing a black cashmere turtleneck and small diamond stud earrings. It was my signature look. Simple, elegant, and unassuming. Slowly, terrifyingly, my mother's eyes drifted up from the magazine to me. She looked at my neck, then at my ears, then back at the magazine. The color drained from her face, leaving it a sickly shade of gray. "It is the same shirt," Darius whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of horror and awe. "Mom, look. It is the exact same shirt she is wearing right now. And those earrings. I made fun of them earlier. I said they looked cheap." "They are not cheap," I said, my voice slicing through their panic. "Those are vintage Cartier studs, and this turtleneck is custom made. I wore it for the photo shoot because I wanted to look like myself, the self you never bothered to see." My mother dropped the magazine onto the desk, as if it had burned her fingers. She stared at me with a look of pure, unadulterated fear. For the first time in my life, I saw her look at me not with contempt, but with the terrifying realization that she was at my mercy. She had just told a billionaire to get out of her house. She had just tried to swindle a woman who could buy and sell her entire existence before breakfast. "So it is true," Tiffany breathed, taking a step back, her heels clicking nervously on the floor. "All this time, the silence, the no social media. You were not hiding because you were ashamed. You were hiding because you were busy taking over the world." I did not answer her. I did not need to. The shift in power was absolute. Just moments ago, I was the cornered animal, and they were the predators. Now I was the giant, and they were the ants waiting to be crushed. The air in the room felt different. It was no longer their study. It was my boardroom. I watched them struggle to process the magnitude of their mistake. Darius looked like he was about to vomit. He was doing the math in his head, realizing that the $50,000 trust fund he had demanded was basically pocket change to me. He realized how small he was, how petty his threats sounded against the backdrop of 10 figures. I walked slowly over to the silver tea service on the side table. My movements were deliberate, unhurried. I picked up the porcelain teapot and poured myself a cup, the liquid dark and steaming. The sound of the tea hitting the china was the only noise in the room. I added a single cube of sugar and stirred it, the spoon clinking softly against the rim. Clink, clink, clink. I took a sip, letting the warmth spread through my chest. I savored the taste. It tasted like victory. I lowered the cup and looked at them over the rim. They were paralyzed, waiting for me to scream, to gloat, to yell, but I did not. "You are only looking at the cover," I said, my voice smooth and calm. "The cover is just the marketing. If you want to understand what is really happening tonight, if you want to know why I am actually standing here, you should open it." I placed the teacup down on the saucer with a gentle click. "Turn to page 54, I said, nodding toward the magazine. "The article is much more detailed, and I think you will find the section on recent acquisitions particularly interesting." It was fascinating to watch how quickly the human spine could bend when money entered the room. My mother, who just seconds ago was clutching her chest in a staged cardiac event, miraculously recovered. The gray pallor vanished from her skin, replaced by a flush of excitement that had nothing to do with maternal love and everything to do with avarice. She stood up from her chair, moving with a vigor I had not seen in years, and crossed the room with her arms wide open. The woman who had threatened to disown me for the second time in a decade was now looking at me as if I were the second coming. "Jasmine," she cried out, her voice trembling with an emotion that sounded suspiciously like relief. "My baby girl, I knew it. Deep down, I always knew you were destined for greatness. Why do you think I was so hard on you? Why do you think I pushed you away all those years ago? It was to make you strong. It was to give you the drive to prove me wrong. And look at you now. You did it. We did it." She wrapped her arms around me, burying her face in the cashmere turtleneck she had just insulted. The smell of her perfume, once a comfort in my childhood, now just smelled like desperation. I stood there like a statue, my arms at my sides refusing to return the embrace. It felt like being hugged by a boa constrictor that had just realized I was too big to swallow whole. She pulled back, keeping her hands on my shoulders, her eyes scanning my face with a possessive gleam. "We have so much to catch up on," she gushed. "I want to hear everything, how you started, who your friends are, where you are living. I always told the ladies at the church that my Jasmine was doing big things. I never doubted you for a second." Darius was the next to pivot. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and let out a loud, booming laugh that sounded entirely too forced. He walked around the desk, buttoning his jacket as if regaining his composure could rewrite the last 10 minutes. He clapped his hands together, pointing at me with a grin that was supposed to be charming, but looked more like a snarl painted over with grease. "You passed," he announced, shaking his head in mock disbelief. "You actually passed? Come on, Jasmine. You didn't think I was serious about the lawsuit, did you? It was a test. A stress test. In our business, you have to know who cracks under pressure and who stands tall. And you are steel. I am proud of you, little sister." He leaned against the desk, casual and confident, as if he wasn't $300,000 in debt to loan sharks. "This changes everything," he continued, his eyes darting to the magazine, and then back to me. "With your capital and my local connections, we can turn this city upside down. I have been looking for a partner, someone with vision. We can rebrand the family business. Williams and Williams. It has a nice ring to it. Don't you think I can handle the operations here in Atlanta? And you can be the silent partner from New York. It is the perfect synergy." Then there was Tiffany. The woman who had thrown an apron at me and called me a whore was now bustling around the tea service with manic energy. She poured a fresh cup of water, her hands shaking so much the ice cubes clinked against the glass like wind chimes. She rushed over to me, practically bowing as she offered the glass. "Here you go, Jasmine," she chirped, her voice an octave higher than usual. "You must be parched after your flight. Can I get you anything else? A pillow for your back? Maybe we should move to the more comfortable chairs in the living room. The lighting in here is dreadful for your complexion. I am so sorry about earlier. You know how stressful the holidays are. I was just projecting. We are sisters, right? Sisters fight, but they always make up." It was a theater of the absurd. In under 60 seconds, I had gone from being the family disgrace to the family savior. They were rewriting history in real time, erasing the insults, the neglect, and the cruelty, replacing them with a narrative where they were the supportive architects of my success. They truly believed that if they smiled wide enough, I would forget the last 8 years. They thought my bank account came with a memory erase button. I looked at my mother, who was still clinging to my arm. I looked at Darius, who was already mentally spending my money. I looked at Tiffany, who was treating me like royalty. I felt a bubble of laughter rise in my chest, but it wasn't joyful. It was dark and bitter. I gently but firmly peeled my mother's fingers off my arm and took a step back, creating a barrier of air between us. I set the water glass down on the desk without drinking it. The sound of the glass hitting the wood silenced their chatter instantly. "Stop it," I said, my voice quiet but cutting. "Just stop acting. You are terrible at it." My mother's smile faltered. "What do you mean, darling?" "We are just happy for you." I looked her dead in the eye. "No, you are happy for my money. 5 minutes ago I was dead to you. 5 minutes ago I was a failure. The only thing that changed is that you found out what I am worth. And frankly, watching you try to pretend you love me is making me physically ill. You make me sick. All of you. You want to know why I find your sudden affections so repulsive? It is because I know exactly where the money went, Darius. And it was not lost to interest rates or supply chain issues or a bad housing market. You stood there 5 minutes ago and looked me in the eye and lied about macroeconomics. You tried to gaslight me with business buzzwords because you thought I was just a girl who got lucky with a computer program. But you forgot one thing. I deal in data, and data never lies. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, unlocking it with a quick scan of my face. The room went quiet again, But this time, the silence was not born of shock. It was born of dread. Darius took a half step toward me, his hands twitching at his sides as if he wanted to snatch the device away, but he knew better than to try. I had my forensic accountants look into your company books before I bought the debt. I said, my voice calm and conversational. It is amazing what you find when you dig past the surface-level spreadsheets. For a company that was supposedly struggling to pay contractors, you certainly had a lot of liquidity flowing out to very interesting vendors. I tapped the screen and held it up. It was a digital copy of his bank statement projected clearly on the high-definition display. October 14th, I read aloud. Withdrawal of $45,000. Marked in your ledger as structural steel procurement. But the wire transfer did not go to a steel mill, Darius. It went to the Bellagio Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. Darius' face turned a sickly shade of gray. That was a business trip, he stammered, his voice rising in panic. I was meeting investors. Networking. You have to spend money to make money, Jasmine. You do not understand how high-level networking works. I swiped to the next image. November 3rd, $22,000, marked as permit fees for the city planning office. Strange, because city permits cost a few $100s, and this payment went to a luxury car dealership for a down payment on a Porsche Cayenne. Tiffany gasped. She turned to look at Darius, her eyes wide. You told me the company leased that car for you. You told me it was a corporate perk because you were crushing your sales targets. Darius ignored her, his eyes fixed on my phone like a deer in headlights. And my personal favorite, I continued swiping again. December 10th. Just 2 weeks ago. While you were supposedly laying off your construction crew because you could not make payroll, you withdrew $35,000 from the operating account, marked as unexpected lumber costs. I looked directly at Tiffany. That is a beautiful diamond tennis bracelet you are wearing, Tiffany. Is it new? Tiffany looked down at her wrist. The diamonds glittered under the chandelier light. She touched them tentatively, her fingers trembling. Darius gave it to me for our anniversary, she whispered. He said it was from his quarterly bonus. He said the Skyline project was doing so well that he wanted to spoil me. There was no bonus, Tiffany, I said brutally. There is no profit. He stole that money from the company payroll. He took food out of the mouths of his workers' families so he could buy you jewelry to keep you quiet and happy. You are wearing stolen funds. The room erupted. The facade of the happy, successful power couple shattered into a million pieces. Tiffany let out a shriek that sounded like a wounded animal. She ripped the bracelet off her wrist and threw it at Darius. It hit him in the chest and fell to the floor, lying there like a coiled snake. You liar! She screamed. Her face twisted in ugly rage. You told me we were rich. You told me everything was handled. I have been walking around town bragging about your success, and you have been stealing. You bought me gifts with stolen money. Do you know what this makes me look like? It makes you look like exactly what you are, I interjected coldly. An accessory. Tiffany whipped her head around to look at me, her anger momentarily redirected. I did not know, she hissed. I am a victim here too. He lied to me. He lied because you demanded a lifestyle he could not afford, I replied. Do not play the innocent victim now. You liked the cars. You liked the trips. You never asked where the money came from as long as the checks cleared. Darius finally found his voice. Shut up, Jasmine, he roared, veins bulging in his neck. You are trying to destroy my marriage. You are trying to turn everyone against me. Mom, tell her to stop. But my mother was not speaking. She was sitting in her chair, staring at the wall, her lips moving silently. She was doing the math. She was realizing that the son she had idolized, the son she had put on a pedestal while kicking me into the dirt, was not just a failure. He was a criminal. This is not about destroying your marriage, Darius, I said, slipping the phone back into my pocket. This is about facts. You owe $300,000 to loan sharks because you gambled away the company assets. You owe another $2 million to the bank, which is the debt I now own. You are not a businessman. You are a con artist. And you are done. But let us put aside the embezzlement for a moment, because frankly, that is a matter for the police, and I have bigger news for you. While you were busy buying diamonds and gambling away your future, you forgot about the most important asset you have. This house. You told me earlier that the bank was going to foreclose tomorrow if you did not come up with the money. You were operating under the assumption that you still had time. You thought you had 24 hours to beg, borrow, or steal enough cash to keep the wolves at bay. I walked back to the desk and picked up the thick leather portfolio I had brought with me. It was heavy in my hands, weighted down by the legal power I now held over them. I unzipped it slowly, the sound loud and grating in the quiet room. You were wrong, Darius. Banks do not like uncertainty. When the rumors about your insolvency hit the market this morning, the bank got nervous. They did not want to wait for foreclosure proceedings. They did not want the hassle of evicting a high-profile family and dealing with the bad press. So they did what banks always do when they have a toxic asset on their books. They sold the debt. Darius shook his head, confusion clouding his panic. What do you mean they sold it? They cannot just sell my mortgage without notifying me. They can when you are in default, I corrected him. It is in the fine print of that contract you signed without reading. They put your distressed mortgage up for a private expedited sale this afternoon. They wanted cash and they wanted out. I pulled a crisp blue folder from the portfolio and slid it across the desk. It stopped right in front of my mother. She looked down at it, but did not touch it as if it were radioactive. The auction closed at 4 o'clock today. I continued, my voice steady and relentless. There was only one bidder with enough liquidity to cover the entire principal plus the penalties in a single wire transfer. A private equity firm called JW Holdings. Darius looked at the folder, then at me. His brow furrowed as he tried to connect the dots. JW Holdings. He whispered the name. JW. It took him a second. I watched the realization hit him like a physical blow. His eyes widened and his jaw went slack. He looked at the magazine cover still lying on the desk, where my name was printed in gold letters. Jasmine Williams. JW. You, he gasped, taking a staggering step back. You bought the note. I did not just buy the note, Darius, I said. I bought the deed. I bought the land. I bought the bricks this house is built with, and the roof over your head. As of the closing of business today, I am the sole legal owner of this estate. My mother finally reached out and opened the folder. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely turn the page. She stared at the transfer of ownership document stamped and notarized. This was her kingdom. This house was her identity. It was the stage where she played the role of the grand matriarch. And in the blink of an eye, it had been snatched away by the daughter she had cast aside. This cannot be legal, she whispered, her voice sounding thin and old. You cannot just come in here and buy our home, Jasmine. This is family property. Your father built this life for us. Father built it, I replied. And Darius destroyed it. I just salvaged the wreckage. You should be thanking me. If the bank had foreclosed, the sheriff would be here tomorrow to throw your furniture onto the lawn. At least this way, the humiliating transition of power stays within the family. Tiffany let out a sob, collapsing onto the sofa again. So you are our landlord, she cried. We have to pay rent to you. That is humiliating. I cannot live like that. I cannot look you in the eye every month and hand you a check. I looked at Tiffany with a cold smile. Oh, do not worry, Tiffany. You will not be paying me rent. Hope flared in her eyes for a brief second. A pathetic, desperate hope that maybe I would let them live there for free. That maybe I was still the pushover little sister they could exploit. Because I do not rent to people with bad credit and a history of theft, I finished crushing her hope instantly. I have very strict standards for my tenants, and frankly, none of you meet the criteria. I placed my hands flat on the desk, leaning forward, so I was eye level with my brother, who was now trembling with a mixture of rage and terror. The power dynamic had shifted completely. I was no longer a guest in their home. I was the master of the house and they were the intruders. I checked my watch. "It is getting late," I said, my tone dismissive. "And I have a very busy day tomorrow. I plan to bring in my architects to remodel the East Wing. I never liked the way you decorated it, Mother. It always felt so cold." I stood up straight and smoothed down the front of my turtleneck. "So here is the situation. You are standing in my house. You are drinking my tea. You are breathing my air. And if there is one thing I have learned in business, it is that you must ruthlessly eliminate liabilities." I looked from Darius to Tiffany, and finally to my mother. "I do not like uninvited guests," I said, my voice dropping to a final deadly whisper. "And as of this moment, you are all trespassing." The reality of my declaration hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. I watched the color drain from Tiffany's face until she looked like a wax figure melting under the heat of her own catastrophe. For a woman like Tiffany, losing a home was not just about shelter. It was about losing her stage. Without this mansion, without the prestigious address, and the heated pool, and the weekly garden parties, she was nobody. She was just a 30-year-old woman with no degree, no job history, and a husband who was about to be indicted for fraud. She looked at Darius, who was staring blankly at the floor, and realized in that terrifying moment that he was no longer her ticket to the good life. He was a sinking anchor, and I was the only lifeboat left in the ocean. She let out a whimper, a sound so pathetic it was hard to believe it came from the same throat that had been screaming slurs at me mere minutes ago. Her knees, usually so strong from Pilates and expensive gym memberships, buckled. She sank down onto the Persian rug, the red silk of her dress pooling around her like spilled blood. She did not kneel to pray, she knelt to me. "Jasmine," she choked out, reaching for the hem of my trousers, but stopping just short of touching me when she saw the look in my eyes. "Please. You cannot do this. You cannot throw us out on the street. It is Christmas Eve. Think about what people will say. Think about the family." I looked down at her, studying the top of her blonde head. From this angle she looked small, harmless. But I knew better. I knew that a snake was still a snake even when it was belly up. "I am thinking about the family, Tiffany," I said, my voice devoid of pity. "I am thinking about how this family treated me for 8 years. I am thinking about how you treated me 8 minutes ago." She looked up, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. Black mascara ran down her cheeks like war paint. I was scared she sobbed, grasping at straws. "I was just trying to protect my home. You have to understand, Jasmine. Us women, we have to look out for ourselves. Darius. He tricked me too. He is the villain here. Not me. We are sisters, Jasmine. We are both women trying to survive in a man's world. You understand that, right? Don't punish me for his mistakes. Let me stay. I can help you. I can manage the house. I know how to run this place." I let out a short, sharp laugh. It was incredible. She was playing the feminism card. She was trying to invoke a sisterhood she had spent the entire evening desecrating. She wanted to be my ally now that I held the keys to the kingdom. "That is funny," I said, taking a step closer so I towered over her. "Because when I walked in that door, you did not see a sister. You did not see a woman trying to survive. You saw a servant. You saw someone beneath you. You told me to use the back entrance. You told me to fetch ice. You asked me if I lived in a closet." I leaned down, my face inches from hers. "You called me the help, Tiffany. Remember, you said good help is hard to find. Well, now you are kneeling in front of the help. What does that make you?" She flinched as if I had slapped her. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She knew there was no defense. She had dug her own grave with her tongue, and now she was lying in it. "I am sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I will do anything. Please. I have nowhere to go. My parents. They think I am successful. They think I am living the dream. If you kick me out, I lose everything. I will be a laughingstock. I will be nothing." I straightened up, looking around the room, until my eyes landed on the white catering apron she had thrown at me when I first arrived. It was lying on the side table where I had left it, a stark white symbol of her arrogance. I walked over and picked it up. The fabric was stiff and cheap. I walked back to where she was kneeling and held it out. "You said you would do anything I said." She looked at the apron, then up at me, confusion and horror warring in her eyes. "You want to stay in this house?" I continued. "You want to keep the roof over your head? Fine. I am a generous landlord. I am willing to offer you a position." I tossed the apron. It fluttered through the air and landed squarely on her head, covering her perfectly coiffed hair like a shroud. She pulled it off slowly, clutching it in her trembling hands. "Put it on," I ordered. "Put it on, Ei." She stared at me, her lower lip trembling. You want me to wear this?" "You said we were short on staff," I reminded her, my voice hard as granite. "You said the guests were waiting, and the glasses were empty. Well, the guests are gone, but the mess remains. If you want to sleep under my roof tonight, you are going to earn your keep." I pointed to the kitchen door, the same door she had tried to banish me to earlier. "Put on the apron, Tiffany. Go into the kitchen, and start scrubbing. If I see a single spot on those counters, you are out on the street." She looked at Darius, begging him to intervene to save her dignity. But Darius just stared at the floor, defeated. He could not even save himself. She looked at my mother, but she was too busy mourning the loss of her mansion to care about her daughter-in-law's humiliation. Tiffany slowly, painfully stood up. She fumbled with the strings of the apron, her diamond ring catching on the cheap fabric. She tied it around her waist over her red silk dress. It was a grotesque image, the symbol of her vanity covered by the symbol of her servitude. I checked my watch. "You have until midnight to get this house spotless," I said. "Prove to me that you are useful. Because right now, Tiffany, even your dog contributes more to this household than you do. At least she offers companionship. All you offer is noise. Now get to work." With Tiffany relegated to the scullery and Darius reduced to a mute statue staring at the floor, I turned my attention to the real business at hand. Restructuring. I did not treat this as a family meeting. I treated it like a hostile takeover where I had just acquired a failing subsidiary and needed to trim the fat immediately. I pulled out my phone and opened a new spreadsheet. I began walking the perimeter of the room, cataloging assets with the dispassionate eye of an auditor. I tapped the screen. The Persian rug, asset number 1. The grandfather clock in the corner. Asset number 2. The crystal vase on the mantel. Asset number 3. My mother watched me with a mixture of confusion and growing dread. She cleared her throat, adjusting her pearl necklace as if it were choking her. "Jasmine, dear," she started, her voice wavering slightly. "I understand you are angry with Darius, but surely we can discuss the logistics. My pension is quite small, and your father did not leave much liquid cash. I assume you will be taking over the household expenses. I will need the driver for my Tuesday bridge club, and the gardener comes on Thursdays. And of course there is the monthly allowance for my prescriptions and essentials." She trailed off as I stopped typing and slowly turned to face her. The sheer audacity of this woman was breathtaking. She had just spent the evening calling me a failure and a disgrace, yet the moment the deed to the house transferred to my name, she expected the Bank of Jasmine to open its doors. She truly believed that motherhood was a lifetime subscription service that she could never cancel no matter how poorly she treated the customer. I walked back to the desk and leaned against it, crossing my arms. Assumption is a dangerous thing in business. "Mother," I said, my voice cool and detached, "I will be taking over the expenses of my property, maintenance, taxes, utilities. I will ensure the roof does not leak and the pipes do not burst. But as for your personal expenses, your driver, your bridge club fees, your clothing allowance, your so-called essentials, consider those lines of credit permanently closed." Patricia gasped, clutching the arms of her chair. "You cannot mean that. How am I supposed to live?" "I have standards, Jasmine. I have a reputation to maintain in this community. You have billions. What is a few thousand a month to you? It is a drop in the bucket. It is not about the amount," I corrected her. "It is about the return on investment." And frankly, funding your lifestyle has yielded zero returns. You spent the last 8 years pretending I did not exist until you needed cash. You do not get to treat me like a stranger when I am poor, and then claim me as a daughter when I am rich. That is not how relationships work. That is how prostitution works. She stood up then, trembling with indignation, her face flushed a deep red. "How dare you!" she screamed. "You ungrateful child! I am your mother. It is your duty to care for me. I gave you life. I raised you. There are laws, Jasmine, filial responsibility. You owe me. You owe me for every meal I fed you, every piece of clothing I put on your back, every night I stayed up when you were sick. You cannot just cut me off. I made you." I listened to her rant without blinking. This was the argument I had been waiting for. The biological debt. The idea that being born put me in the red for the rest of my life. I walked back to my leather portfolio and pulled out a specific file. It was thin but heavy with meaning. I slid it across the mahogany surface until it rested directly under her nose. "Open it," I said. She stared at the folder, breathing heavily. She opened it with shaking fingers. Inside were copies of bank statements, invoices, and hospital bills from the last 8 years. "What is this?" she whispered. "That is an audit of my life. Since the day you kicked me out," I explained, pointing to the first page. "That represents the student loans I took out to finish my degree because you cut off my tuition. That is the bill for my emergency appendectomy 3 years ago, when I was alone in the hospital and had to put the surgery on a credit card with 20% interest. That is the rent for the basement apartment I lived in while I was coding the algorithm that made me a billionaire." I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You say I owe you for raising me. Fine, let us do the math. You provided food and shelter until I was 18. That is the legal requirement for a parent. But after I turned 18, after I left this house, you contributed exactly $0 to my survival. You did not call, you did not visit, you did not send a birthday card." I pointed to the final figure at the bottom of the page. "I paid for my own education. I paid for my own health care. I paid for my own trauma therapy to get over the damage this family caused. So if we are talking about debts, Mother, we are song fang. We are even. I do not owe you a dime. And as of tonight, you are no longer my dependent. You are just a tenant on probation, and tenants pay their own bills." With Tiffany relegated to the scullery, and Darius reduced to a mute statue staring at the floor, I turned my attention to the real business at hand. Restructuring. I did not treat this as a family meeting. I treated it like a hostile takeover where I had just acquired a failing subsidiary and needed to trim the fat immediately. I pulled out my phone and opened a new spreadsheet. I began walking the perimeter of the room, cataloging assets with the dispassionate eye of an auditor. I tapped the screen. The Persian rug. Asset number 1. The grandfather clock in the corner. Asset number 2. The crystal vase on the mantel. Asset number 3. My mother watched me with a mixture of confusion and growing dread. She cleared her throat, adjusting her pearl necklace, as if it were choking her. "Jasmine, dear," she started, her voice wavering slightly. "I understand you are angry with Darius, but surely we can discuss the logistics. My pension is quite small, and your father did not leave much liquid cash. I assume you will be taking over the household expenses. I will need the driver for my Tuesday bridge club, and the gardener comes on Thursdays. And of course there is the monthly allowance for my prescriptions and essentials." She trailed off as I stopped typing and slowly turned to face her. The sheer audacity of this woman was breathtaking. She had just spent the evening calling me a failure and a disgrace, yet the moment the deed to the house transferred to my name, she expected the Bank of Jasmine to open its doors. She truly believed that motherhood was a lifetime subscription service that she could never cancel, no matter how poorly she treated the customer. I walked back to the desk and leaned against it, crossing my arms. Assumption is a dangerous thing in business. "Mother," I said, my voice cool and detached. I will be taking over the expenses of my property. Maintenance, taxes, utilities. I will ensure the roof does not leak and the pipes do not burst. But as for your personal expenses, your driver, your bridge club fees, your clothing allowance, your so-called essentials, consider those lines of credit permanently closed. Patricia gasped, clutching the arms of her chair. You cannot mean that. How am I supposed to live? I have standards, Jasmine. I have a reputation to maintain in this community. You have billions. What is a few thousand a month to you? It is a drop in the bucket. It is not about the amount, I corrected her. It is about the return on investment. And frankly, funding your lifestyle has yielded zero returns. You spent the last 8 years pretending I did not exist until you needed cash. You do not get to treat me like a stranger when I am poor, and then claim me as a daughter when I am rich. That is not how relationships work. That is how prostitution works. She stood up then, trembling with indignation. Her face flushed a deep red. How dare you, she screamed. You ungrateful child. I am your mother. It is your duty to care for me. I gave you life. I raised you. There are laws, Jasmine. Filial responsibility. You owe me. You owe me for every meal I fed you, every piece of clothing I put on your back, every night I stayed up when you were sick. You cannot just cut me off. I made you. I listened to her rant without blinking. This was the argument I had been waiting for, the biological debt, the idea that being born put me in the red for the rest of my life. I walked back to my leather portfolio and pulled out a specific file. It was thin, but heavy with meaning. I slid it across the mahogany surface until it rested directly under her nose. Open it, I said. She stared at the folder, breathing heavily. She opened it with shaking fingers. Inside were copies of bank statements, invoices, and hospital bills from the last 8 years. What is this? She whispered. That is an audit of my life since the day you kicked me out, I explained, pointing to the first page. That represents the student loans I took out to finish my degree because you cut off my tuition. That is the bill for my emergency appendectomy 3 years ago when I was alone in the hospital and had to put the surgery on a credit card with 20% interest. That is the rent for the basement apartment I lived in while I was coding the algorithm that made me a billionaire. I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. You say I owe you for raising me. Fine. Let us do the math. You provided food and shelter until I was 18. That is the legal requirement for a parent. But after I turned 18, after I left this house, you contributed exactly $0 to my survival. You did not call. You did not visit. You did not send a birthday card. I pointed to the final figure at the bottom of the page. I paid for my own education. I paid for my own health care. I paid for my own trauma therapy to get over the damage this family caused. So if we are talking about debts, Mother, we are song-fang. We are even. I do not owe you a dime. And as of tonight, you are no longer my dependent. You are just a tenant on probation. And tenants pay their own bills. My mother sank back into her chair, clutching the folder of receipts like it was a death certificate for her lifestyle. She had been neutralized. Now there was only one loose end left to tie up, and he was standing near the window, trying to look invisible. I turned my gaze to Darius. He flinched visibly when my eyes landed on him. He knew what was coming, but his arrogance was a shield that was hard to put down. He straightened his tie and cleared his throat, trying to summon the ghost of the authority he used to wield in this room. So he said, his voice shaky but defiant. You own the house. Fine. And you own the debt. Fine. We will work out a payment plan. I can restructure the company finances. The Skyline project is still viable, Jasmine. If we just get the permits, we can turn a profit by Q3. I know this business. I know the local players. You need me running things on the ground while you are in New York. I looked at him with genuine curiosity. He actually believed that after everything I had just exposed, after the embezzlement and the lies, that I would let him anywhere near a checkbook. It was delusional. I walked over to the desk and picked up a single sheet of paper that had been sitting under the purchase agreement. You seem to be confused about the nature of this acquisition, Darius, I said calmly. When I bought the debt, I also executed a clause that gives me controlling interest in the company. As the majority shareholder, I have the right to make executive changes effective immediately. Darius laughed nervously. Executive changes? What does that mean? You are going to put me on probation. Look, I can handle a pay cut if that is what you want. I will work for a base salary until we are in the black. I shook my head slowly. No, Darius. There is no pay cut, because there is no job. The room went deadly silent. Tiffany stopped scrubbing the floor in the hallway and peered around the doorframe. My mother looked up from her misery. What did you say? Darius whispered. I said you are fired, I replied, my voice ringing clear and final. As of 5 minutes ago, you have been removed from your position as CEO. Your access to the company accounts has been revoked. Your company email has been deactivated, and the security team at the downtown office is currently packing your personal effects into a box which will be left at the curb. Darius' face turned a violent shade of purple. You cannot do that, he shouted, stepping toward me. I am the founder. I built this company. My name is on the door. You cannot just fire me from my own legacy. You inherited a legacy and turned it into a Ponzi scheme, I corrected him. And yes, I can fire you. In fact, I already have. And I have already appointed your replacement. I checked my watch. At this very moment, Mr. Marcus Sterling is walking into your office. You know Marcus, don't you? He was your CFO. The one you fired 2 years ago because he refused to cook the books for you. He is the new interim CEO. And unlike you, he actually knows how to run a construction firm without stealing from the payroll. Darius looked like he had been punched in the gut. Marcus Sterling was his nemesis. He was the man Darius had humiliated and blackballed from the industry to cover up his own incompetence. The thought of Marcus sitting in his chair using his computer giving orders to his staff was more than Darius could handle. You brought Marcus back, he choked out. You put that traitor in charge of my company. He is not a traitor, Darius. He is a professional. Something you have never been. And under his leadership, I expect the company to actually be profitable within 6 months. Without the drain of your gambling habits and Tiffany's jewelry purchases, the margins are actually quite healthy. Darius looked around the room frantically as if searching for a weapon or a way out. He looked at Tiffany, who was staring at him with disgust. He looked at our mother, who was too defeated to help him. He realized in that moment that he was truly naked. Without the title of CEO, he was just a man with a gambling addiction and a mountain of debt. You are ruining me, he screamed, his hands balling into fists. You are taking my house. You are taking my job. You are taking my dignity. Who do you think you are? You are just a bitter little girl who got lucky with a computer program. You do not deserve this power. I deserve it because I earned it. I said, standing my ground. I built something from nothing while you took everything and turned it into nothing. You are not a victim, Darius. You are a casualty of your own greed. That was the breaking point. The veneer of civilization cracked. Darius let out a primal roar of rage. He was no longer a brother or a businessman. He was a cornered animal lashing out. I will kill you, he shrieked, lunging across the room. He moved fast, fueled by adrenaline and hate. He raised his fist, aiming directly for my face, intending to smash the smile he hated so much. My mother screamed. Tiffany covered her eyes. I did not flinch. I did not move. I did not even blink, because I knew something they did not. Just as Darius was within striking distance, just as his fist was inches from my face, 2 massive shadows materialized from the hallway. They moved with a speed and precision that was almost terrifying. A heavy hand clamped onto Darius' wrist, stopping it dead in the air. Another arm wrapped around his neck in a chokehold that was firm but controlled. Darius' momentum was halted instantly. He gagged his feet, lifting off the floor as he was pulled back away from me. I watched calmly as my 2 personal security guards, Stone and David, who had been waiting silently in the foyer the entire time, neutralized the threat. They were ex-military men I had hired in New York, and they took their job very seriously. Stone, the larger of the two, twisted Darius' arm behind his back, forcing him down onto his knees. Darius cried out in pain, his expensive suit straining at the seams. "Stay down!" Stone growled, his voice deep and menacing. "Do not move unless you want to lose the arm." I looked down at my brother kneeling before me once again, not in supplication this time, but in defeat. He was panting heavily, sweat dripping from his face, his eyes wild with shock. I took a sip of my tea, which I had never put down. "I told you, Darius," I said softly. "I do not like uninvited guests, and I certainly do not tolerate violence in my boardroom. Stone, please escort Mr. Williams to the curb. He is no longer welcome on this property." As Stone released his grip on Darius, allowing him to slump against the wall, gasping for air, the room did not return to silence. Instead, it descended into a different kind of chaos. The illusion of the united front, which my family had maintained so desperately all evening, finally shattered completely. It started with a sound that was sharp and metallic. I looked over to the kitchen doorway to see Tiffany ripping the white catering apron off her body with such force that the fabric tore. She threw it onto the floor and then immediately began clawing at her left hand. She struggled with the massive diamond engagement ring, the one bought with stolen funds, until she yanked it past her knuckle. She hurled it at Darius. The heavy stone hit him squarely in the chest and bounced away, skittering across the hardwood floor until it vanished under the sofa. "I am done!" Tiffany screamed, her voice hysteria pitch. "I am done with you, Darius. I am done with this family, and I am certainly done being humiliated." Darius looked up from the floor, his eyes red and watery. He looked like a man who had just survived a car crash only to realize his insurance had expired. "Tiffany, baby?" he wheezed, reaching a hand out toward her. "Do not do this. We can fix it. It is just a setback. I can get another job. I can start over." "Start over?" Tiffany laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that made my mother flinch. "You are nearly 40 years old, Darius. You are bankrupt. You are facing prison time for embezzlement. And you just got fired by your little sister. There is no starting over. You are finished, and I am not going to let you drag me down into the gutter with you." She turned to face me, ignoring her husband completely. "I want it on the record, Jasmine," she said, her voice shaking with adrenaline. "I am filing for divorce immediately. I had no knowledge of his criminal activities. I was a victim of his deception just like the investors. I am leaving him right now." Darius let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. "You promised," he cried. "You vowed, for richer or for poorer. You said you loved me." "I loved the man I thought you were," Tiffany spat back. "I loved the CEO. I loved the provider. I did not sign up to visit you in federal prison and live in a rental apartment. I have years of beauty left, Darius, and I am not going to waste them on a loser who could not even outsmart his own sister." That is when my mother finally snapped. She had been sitting in her chair watching her world collapse, but seeing Tiffany turn on her golden child was the final straw. She stood up, trembling with rage, pointing a shaking finger at her daughter-in-law. "You quiet witch," my mother shrieked. "How dare you kick him when he is down? You are the reason he stole that money. You and your greed. You needed the new car. You needed the vacations. You pressured him to buy you things he could not afford. You drove him to this." "Me," Tiffany yelled back, her eyes bulging. "You are the one who raised him to be an entitled brat. You are the one who told him he was a king who could do no wrong. You created a narcissist, Patricia, and now you are mad that reality finally hit him in the face." I stood by the window watching them tear each other apart. It was like watching a nature documentary about predators turning on each other when the food supply ran out. They were vicious, they were ugly, and they were revealing their true selves in high definition. All the politeness, all the Southern charm, all the talk of family values had evaporated the moment the money disappeared. My mother lunged toward Tiffany, grabbing her arm. "Get out of my house, you gold digger! It is not your house anymore!" Tiffany screamed, shaking her off. "It is Jasmine House. You are just a tenant on probation, remember? You have no authority here. You are just a broke old woman with a criminal son." The insults flew back and forth, getting nastier and more personal with every second. They brought up old grudges. They weaponized secrets. They blamed each other for everything from Darius' business failures to the way the curtains were hung. It was a symphony of dysfunction, and I was the conductor who had finally allowed the music to play. I took a final sip of my tea and set the cup down on the saucer with a deliberate clatter. The sound cut through their screaming match. They stopped, chest-heaving, hair disheveled, looking at me. They seemed to remember all at once that I was still there, and that I was the only one holding the cards. I checked the diamond watch on my wrist, tapping the face of it lightly. "This has been incredibly entertaining," I said, my voice cool and detached. "Watching you eat each other alive really confirms everything I suspected about this family. There is no loyalty here. There is only leverage. And since none of you have any leverage left, I am ending this show." I looked at Darius, who was weeping silently on the floor. I looked at Tiffany, who was clutching her purse like a shield. I looked at my mother, who was panting with exertion. "I told you I was bringing the architects in tomorrow morning," I said, walking toward the door. "That means I need the house empty." I held up 3 fingers. "You have 30 minutes, I announced. Not 31, 30. Go to your rooms. Pack your personal essentials. Leave the furniture. Leave the art. Leave anything that has value, because those are now my assets to cover your debts. You can take your clothes and your toiletries." "But Jasmine, where will we go?" my mother cried, her anger instantly replaced by fear again. "It is night. It is cold. I honestly do not care," I replied, opening the front door and gesturing to the dark driveway where the wind was howling. "You figured out how to live without me for 8 years. I am sure you can figure out how to survive the night. Start packing. The clock is ticking." The next 29 minutes were a masterclass in frantic desperation. The house that had been filled with the sounds of arrogance and laughter just an hour ago was now filled with the chaotic noise of zippers being pulled and drawers being rifled through. I stood by the front door like a sentinel, my arms crossed, watching the dismantling of the dynasty that had rejected me. Darius moved like a zombie, dragging a suitcase that was missing a wheel, scraping a jagged line across the hardwood floor he was no longer allowed to walk on. He did not look at me. He could not look at me. He was a man whose entire identity had been stripped away, leaving nothing but a hollow shell of entitlement. But Tiffany was not going down without a fight, although it was a petty and pathetic one. I watched her scurrying around the dining room like a rat on a sinking ship. She was clutching her oversized designer handbag to her chest, looking nervously over her shoulder. She thought she was being subtle, but Stone, my head of security, had been tracking her every move with the precision of a hawk. Just as she tried to brush past him toward the exit, Stone stepped sideways, blocking her path with his massive frame. "Open the bag," Mrs. William Stone said, his voice flat and commanding. Tiffany gasped, clutching the bag tighter. "Excuse me. This is my personal property. You have no right to search me." "Open the bag, Tiffany," I called out from the doorway. "Unless you want Stone to open it for you. And trust me, he is not gentle with zippers." Her face crumbled. With shaking hands, she unclasped the bag. Stone reached inside and pulled out a handful of antique silver forks and a heavy crystal paperweight. He dropped them onto the side table with a loud clatter that echoed through the foyer. "Really, Tiffany?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "You are trying to steal forks. Is that what your dignity is worth? A few ounces of silver." She did not answer. She just snatched her bag back, tears of humiliation streaming down her face, and hurried out the door into the biting wind without looking back. My mother was the last to come down the curved staircase. She was wearing her mink coat and dragging a small carry-on bag. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs, looking around the foyer with a heartbreaking expression of loss. This house was her skin. Leaving it was like being flayed alive. She walked over to me, slowly stopping just inches away. She did not look angry anymore. She looked old, small, fragile. "Jasmine," she said, her voice trembling. "Please, be reasonable. It is freezing outside. I am 60 years old. I cannot go to a hotel. I cannot sleep in a car. Just let me stay in the guest room, just for tonight. I will be quiet. I will not bother you. I will leave in the morning, I promise. Just give me one night of mercy." I looked at her. I saw the woman who had locked me out of this very house 8 years ago, without a coat, without money, and without mercy. I remembered begging her through the letter slot. I remembered her telling me to learn a lesson. "I have already made arrangements for you, Mother," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "I am not a monster. I would not let you sleep on the street." Her eyes lit up with hope. She thought she had won. She thought she had cracked my armor. "Thank you, Jasmine," she breathed, reaching out to touch my hand. "I knew you still loved me. I knew you would not abandon your mother." I stepped back, avoiding her touch. "I called a car for you." I continued, handing her a slip of paper. "It is waiting at the gate. It will take you to Sunrise Gardens." "Sunrise Gardens," she repeated, confusion clouding her face. "What is that? Is it a hotel?" "It is a state-assisted living facility on the south side," I explained. "It is not the Ritz, but it is warm and they have a bed for you. I paid for your first month in full. Consider it my final gift. You have 30 days to figure out your next move. I suggest you start looking for a job." The hope in her eyes died instantly, replaced by horror. Sunrise Gardens was the place she used to make fun of, the place where people went when they had nobody. "You are sending me to a nursing home," she whispered. "You are sending me to live with charity cases." "I am sending you where you can afford to live," I said, checking my watch. "Your 30 minutes are up." I gestured to the open door where the cold wind was blowing in, swirling the snow around her feet. "Goodbye, Mother." She stared at me for one last second, searching for a trace of the daughter she used to manipulate. But she found only a reflection of her own cruelty staring back at her. Shoulders slumped, she turned and walked out into the night, joining her criminal son and her thief of a daughter-in-law in the darkness. I watched them huddle together by the gate for a moment, before I reached out and took hold of the heavy brass handle. I did not slam the door. I closed it firmly and deliberately. The lock clicked into place with a sound that felt like the final period at the end of a very long and painful sentence. Silence instantly filled the house. But this time it was not the silence of oppression. It was the silence of peace. The silence that followed the closing of the heavy oak door was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. For the first time in 34 years, this house did not feel like a prison or a stage for performance art. It felt like what it actually was, just a pile of bricks and mortar that I happened to own. I walked through the empty hallway, the heels of my loafers clicking rhythmically against the floor. I did not feel sad. I did not feel lonely. I felt a profound sense of lightness, as if a heavy coat I had been wearing for a decade had finally been taken off. I looked at the crystal chandelier one last time, not with longing but with the indifference of a landlord inspecting a property. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang once before being picked up. "Jasmine," the voice on the other end shouted over the sound of music and laughter. "Did you survive? Are you okay?" It was Sarah, my co-founder and best friend in New York. The woman who had brought me soup when I was sick and celebrated every small win when we were building our company in a basement. I did not just survive, I said, a real smile finally breaking across my face. I thrived. "It is done, Sarah. They are gone." I could hear the cheers in the background from the holiday party at our office. The people who actually respected me. The people who celebrated my success without asking for a loan. "We are saving you a plate of peach cobbler," Sarah said. "And your present is under the tree. Come home, boss. We miss you." "I am on my way," I promised. I hung up and walked out the front door, leaving the lights on. I did not care about the electric bill. I walked down the stone steps where the wind was still howling, but the cold did not bother me anymore. Waiting at the bottom of the driveway was my black Bentley, its engine purring softly, the heat already blasting inside. Stone held the rear door open, his face stoic but his eyes kind. He knew exactly what had happened inside, and he did not judge me for it. Just as I was about to slide into the warm leather seat, my phone vibrated in my hand. One single notification. I looked down at the screen. It was a text message from the number I had saved as mother. It was short. 2 sentences meant to undo a lifetime of damage. 2 sentences meant to hook me back into the cycle of toxicity. Mommy is sorry. I love you, baby girl. I stared at the words glowing in the dark night. 8 years of silence broken only when I became a billionaire. Years of abuse swept under the rug because she needed a bed to sleep in. She thought those words were a magic spell. She thought I was still the little girl who desperately wanted her approval. She thought that love was a currency she could print whenever she was bankrupt. I did not feel anger. I did not feel guilt. I felt nothing. I did not type a reply. I did not hesitate. I simply tapped the info icon on the top right corner of the screen. I scrolled down to the bottom red text. Block caller. Confirm. The message disappeared from my screen, erasing her from my digital life, just as I had erased her from my physical one. I slid into the car, and the door closed with a solid, reassuring thud, shutting out the winter night and the memories of the people who used to live here. Where to, Ms. Williams? The driver asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror. I looked out the tinted window at the dark outline of the mansion one last time, leaving the past in the rearview mirror where it belonged. The airport. I said, settling back into the seat and closing my eyes. Let us go home. The silence that followed the closing of the heavy oak door was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. For the first time in 34 years, this house did not feel like a prison or a stage for performance art. It felt like what it actually was, just a pile of bricks and mortar that I happened to own. I walked through the empty hallway, the heels of my loafers clicking rhythmically against the floor. I did not feel sad. I did not feel lonely. I felt a profound sense of lightness, as if a heavy coat I had been wearing for a decade had finally been taken off. I looked at the crystal chandelier one last time, not with longing, but with the indifference of a landlord inspecting a property. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang once before being picked up. Jasmine, the voice on the other end, shouted over the sound of music and laughter. Did you survive? Are you okay? It was Sarah, my co-founder and best friend in New York, the woman who had brought me soup when I was sick and celebrated every small win when we were building our company in a basement. I did not just survive, I said, a real smile finally breaking across my face. I thrived. It is done, Sarah. They are gone. I could hear the cheers in the background from the holiday party at our office. The people who actually respected me. The people who celebrated my success without asking for a loan. We are saving you a plate of peach cobbler, Sarah said. And your present is under the tree. Come home, boss. We miss you. I am on my way, I promised. I hung up and walked out the front door, leaving the lights on. I did not care about the electric bill. I walked down the stone steps where the wind was still howling, but the cold did not bother me anymore. Waiting at the bottom of the driveway was my black Bentley, its engine purring softly, the heat already blasting inside. Stone held the rear door open, his face stoic, but his eyes kind. He knew exactly what had happened inside, and he did not judge me for it. Just as I was about to slide into the warm leather seat, my phone vibrated in my hand. One single notification. I looked down at the screen. It was a text message from the number I had saved as mother. It was short. 2 sentences meant to undo a lifetime of damage. 2 sentences meant to hook me back into the cycle of toxicity. Mommy is sorry. I love you, baby girl. I stared at the words glowing in the dark night. 8 years of silence broken only when I became a billionaire. Years of abuse swept under the rug because she needed a bed to sleep in. She thought those words were a magic spell. She thought I was still the little girl who desperately wanted her approval. She thought that love was a currency she could print whenever she was bankrupt. I did not feel anger. I did not feel guilt. I felt nothing. I did not type a reply. I did not hesitate. I simply tapped the info icon on the top right corner of the screen. I scrolled down to the bottom red text. Block caller. Confirm. The message disappeared from my screen, erasing her from my digital life, just as I had erased her from my physical one. I slid into the car, and the door closed with a solid, reassuring thud, shutting out the winter night and the memories of the people who used to live here. Where to? Ms. Williams, the driver asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror. I looked out the tinted window at the dark outline of the mansion one last time, leaving the past in the rearview mirror where it belonged. The airport, I said, settling back into the seat and closing my eyes. Let us go home. This story teaches us that your worth is inherent, never determined by how useful you are to others. Jasmine proved that true success isn't just about the bank account. It is about having the courage to walk away from toxicity, even when it shares your last name. You do not owe anyone access to your peace simply because of blood. If they were absent during your struggle, they have no right to sit at the table of your victory. If you have ever had to choose your dignity over toxic loyalty, hit the like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments, would you have forgiven them,